Well, the Mafikeng High Court has ruled in favour of a disgruntled party member of the ANC in the Northwest who filed an urgent court interdict to stop members of the Interim Provincial Committee from voting at the conference. The ruling sets the much-anticipated provincial conference off to a shaky start. Joining us to unpack these developments and more is political analyst Professor Duvenhage. Professor, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on this morning's programme. Just to touch on yesterday's developments very quickly, the Northwest High Court ruling in favour of those party members who were seeking to have the IPC members basically interdicted from voting in today's conference. Your thoughts on that, and what can we read from those developments?
Morning. Yes, indeed, there was the court interdict. It already throw a shadow over, as you mentioned, the shaky start over the conference, already postponed 3 times. But I think in one way it is positive. The conference is still continuing about the merit of the court case. I think there was merit in the decision because the terms of both the IPC and the regional provincial committees came to an end, so they aren't elected people and they shouldn't be part of the conference according to the court. Now, my take on it is that this is not going to have a major influence on the outcome of the conference. I'm still reading the 2 main candidates as Mr. Bushi Mape and Mr. Nonu Malloy. Mr. Mohamopelu, I believe, is a bit down. His chances to become the chairperson of the ANC is very low. So also the former mayor of Nakamudiri Molema and the 2 women candidates, Khosu and Mosenogi. I think they can, however, make up some alliances in order to compete, but the main fight will be between Nonu Malloy and Bushi Mape, and hopefully we can see on this day some progress in this regard, no disruption, because we need a stable ANC to take the province forward, and the ANC need the provincial conference to continue towards the national conference towards the end of the year. I mean, so you, of course, have expressed your confidence in the conference actually moving ahead today, despite yesterday's developments. But we know that the 9th Provincial Elective Conference is a congress that has been postponed 3 times before. Just talk to us about what's at stake for the organisation this time around. When we talk about the Northwest, we know that this is a region that is, troubled with struggling municipalities, a lack of service delivery, all probably rooted in the fact that the political organisation leading that society is, beset with factional battles, infighting, etc. So how much exactly is at stake for the organisation at this particular elective conference? Well, if we talk Northwest, your summary is quite accurate. It is a province with major challenges. The whole governance structures of the province are falling apart. We know that the provincial government was put under administration, I think, between about 2000 and 2018. There were about 46 provincial interventions on local government in terms of Article 139. There were huge levels of corruption, especially during the term of Mr. Supra Mohamopelu, to the extent that we have seen riots and violence going on. The ANC could not elect leadership. They are without leadership for the last few years, and this has reached a critical point to the extent that the province, as province, is falling apart. Therefore, it is so important that the election continue, that we get elected leaders, and that we can continue in some way, in a united way, forward. But we know the national dynamics of the ANC. We know the conflicts between the Ramaphosa groups on the one side and on the other side the RETs or the Talibans. And without any doubt, this is also influencing what is going on in Northwest. But my take on it is that both the stronger candidates are aligned with Mr. Ramaphosa, and I think that it is highly likely that one of these two candidates may be elected, and this will be a boost for the Ramaphosa campaign towards the national conference during the end of the year.
You know, Professor, I think you'll agree with me in saying that provincial developments within the ANC are pretty much just as nuanced as, you know, the national dynamics that you've mentioned. But talking about the top three contenders that you've listed, Bushimabe, Nono Maloyi and Supra Mahomapelo, let's focus on the Premier for a little bit. He has, you know, run in the Premier's office for I suppose since his election September last year. So I wonder if that provides him with any sort of edge comparatively to the other two contenders that we've listed.
Well, to be the incumbent in terms of the Premier of the province always has a bit of an advantage. But I think the short term he is in position didn't give him enough time to establish, let's say, strong networks. But we know that he has the support of groupings within the ANC in the province. I received information from members of parliament that Mr. Bushimabe currently has the support of the Women's League, the Youth League, and the veteran groups. My take on Mr. Supra Mahomapelo is that he didn't have a strong campaign. He was not nominated by a number of branches. And on the other side, when it comes to Nono Maloyi, he was busy with an orchestrated campaign in the province. And my info is that he is aligned with the likes of people like Paul Mashatile, who is at the moment the acting Secretary General of the ANC. He's also close in an indirect way to Mr. Ramaphosa. So I think, and that is my early assessment, that I think Mr. Nono Maloyi is probably the stronger candidate at this point. Some people are arguing in favor of Bushimabe. If he can really mobilize the Women's League and so on, then he stands a chance. But I think he probably will go into alliances. Some of the info are telling me that the MEC for Economic Affairs, Mosenogi, is aligning with Mr. Supra Mahomapelo. So there's a lot of dynamics going on, but I will still go with Nono Maloyi versus Bushimabe as the two favorites.
Lastly, Professor, you know, organizational renewal and unity, these are some of these seminal themes that we've seen coming out of a number of these elective conferences over the course of the past year. I want to get a sense from you if you believe that developments out in the Northwest, the work that's been conducted by the IPC, if that's been enough for the organization to truly resuscitate itself. And I suppose the second leg to my question is what your expected outcomes are for this conference, given the recent developments we saw in KZN, where we had a completely different slate winning the provincial elective conference, effectively leading to the resignation of former KZN Premier Sihle Zikalala.
Well, to start with, the words unity and renewal are used on a regular basis. But I haven't seen a lot coming from it in terms of real action. The ANC is really not in a renewal. If you listen to the contents of the policy conference, it is still an organization trapped in a political ideology that is coming from the 19th century. There's no real progress in their thinking. They need fundamental reform, but there also seems a lot of resistance to the reform. When it comes to unity, I think the political scene speaks for itself, and there's really no unity. I think at the moment we are seeing some of the deepest divisions in the organization, at least since 1994, but probably also in terms of the bigger history of the organization. I cannot really see that the two groupings, and now I'm referring to the RET groups and their alliance friends on the one side, and on the other side, the Ramaphosa alliance, will really come together and rebuild the organization. This is going to be a huge challenge. You talk about what will happen. what will happen will be decided by who is going to be elected. And I believe that we are going to see a reconfiguration of the politics post the election, more or less in comparison to what we have seen in KZN, where Zigalala resigned, but he resigned in a good spirit to be repositioned as an MEC for Kokta. I'm not seeing that dynamic. I think if Nanu Malloy is winning and he can win on his own slate, we are going to see a repositioning of his people. If it is going to be Bushi Mapi, it will be more or less a continuation of the status quo. We must take into consideration towards the end of the year is the national conference. What makes that national conference different from the policy conference, it can take decisions, but it can also, it is working in terms of a completely another composition, namely the branches. And on the branch levels, the RET groups, the Zumas, the Eisbach-Schules, the Supramamupelus, they are very strong on this level. So that dynamic must come, and then the 2024 election, and people are expecting the ANC not to achieve an absolute majority. So I'm reading a difficult 6 months ahead of us, and I'm reading a difficult time until we reach the 2024 election, and then we need to wait and to see what may come from that election.
Well, Professor, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure. Political analyst, Professor Andre Duvenhage.